Welcome to solverfy.
So, Petrocal Incorporation refines gasoline and sells it through its own gas stations. And we're basically giving like a table that shows the objective, the measures, the actual performance, and the performance. And the first question wants us to find out if Petrocal was successful in implementing its strategy in 2017 and explain your answers. So, the first question. So there are four measures of balanced scorecards, which are namely financial perspectives, customer perspective, internal business perspective, and learning and growth perspective. So measures of balanced scorecards. We have financial perspective, customer perspective, internal business perspective, and the learning and growth perspective. So P Incorporation has achieved increase in shareholders' values through the price recovery and the growth perspective. Now, the actual performance of the price recovery exceeds the target performance by the 5 million and the growth by 2 million. So, by implementing the financial perspective, P Incorporation is going to succeed. So, and the market share of the overall gasoline market has 4% of the target performance, but P has achieved only 3%. So let's start with the financial perspective. So P Incorporation will succeed by implementing the financial perspective. Because the actual performance exceeds the target performance by 5 million. So by $5 million and growth by $2 million. So now the market share of the overall gasoline market has 4% of target performance, but P Corporation has only 3%. Has 4% of target performance, but P Corporation has achieved only 3.8%. Now, P Corporation is unsuccessful in implementing the customer perspective. So the customer perspective. Now, P Incorporation has successfully implemented its internal business process perspective because it exceeds the target performance in maintaining the quality standards and the product availability, and is also successful in implementing the learning and growth perspective as percentage of the refining process with advanced controls has been increased from 95% to 94%. So, pre-incorporation successfully implemented its internal business process perspective as it exceeded its target performance by maintaining quality standards and reliability. And it also successfully implemented the learning and growth perspective as the percentage of the refining process with the advanced controls rather, has been increased to 95%, and it was 94% before. So moving on, the second question, would you have included some of the measures of employee satisfaction and employee training in the learning and growth perspective? And are these objectives critical to Petrocal for implementing a strategy? Why or why not? Explain briefly. So, the first thing you observe would be it's very important to include the measure of employee satisfaction and employee training in the learning and growth perspective because they are important to their objective are important to P incorporation for implementing the strategy. Without the strategy, without the objective, it's impossible to succeed in the learning and growth perspective. So it is important to include employee satisfaction and employee training in the learning and the growth perspective. So the objectives are important for P incorporation to implement strategy that will be successful in the perspective. So now the learning and growth perspective must include the employee satisfaction and the employee training because there would be no measure of the learning of growth perspective without the objective. So therefore it is very vital to include the objective into the learning and growth object perspective. So now the third question. Explain how Petrocal did not achieve its target market share in the total gasoline market, but still exceeded its financial targets. Is market share of overall gasoline market the correct measure of the market share? Explain briefly. So there could be a few factors which resulted in successful implementation of the financial perspective, but failures in the customer perspective. The reasons for the improvement in financial perspective may be due to increase in the selling price but reducing total cost. Decrease in total cost. So the market share of the overall gasoline market is a good measure of the customer perspective because it must include other measures of increase in customer satisfaction and increase in the number of new customers. So we can say that the market share of overall gasoline is a correct measure of the customer performance. Market share of overall gasoline market is a correct measure of customer perspective. But it must include other measures of increase in the customer satisfaction and new customers. So yeah, it's a good measure of customer perspective. Now moving on to the fourth question. Is there a cause and effect linkage between the improvements in the measures in the internal business process perspective and the measure of in the customer perspective? That is, would you add other measures to the internal business process perspective of or the customer perspective? Why or why not? So there is a broad cause and effect linkage about how the improvement in learning and growth perspective results in internal business process, right? And this leads to higher customer satisfaction, which depends on the superior performance. So yeah, the cause and effect linkage leads to higher customer satisfactions and superior. It depends on superior performance. So there is a broad cause and effect linkage which leads to higher customer satisfaction which depends on the superior performance. So the market share of the overall gasoline market is a good measure of the customer perspective because it must include other measures of increase in satisfaction and the increase in number of new new customers, which you said in the previous question. And the internal business process perspective must include the improve in post-sales service, the reduction of the delivery time, the manufacturing capability, and all that. So pre-incorporation's internal business process perspective is a measure which makes all the difference in the rest of the perspective with many more measures and initiatives. So P incorporation, internal business process perspective is a measure which makes all the difference in the rest of the perspective. With many more measures of initiatives. So now the final question. Do you agree with Petrocal's decision not to include the measures of changes in operating income from productivity improvements under the financial perspective of the balanced scorecard? Explain briefly. So I would say that P incorporation must include operating income changes from productivity improvements as one of the measures of the financial perspective. So the answer would be no, I don't agree, because Petrol's decision is not to include the measures of changes. So the financial perspective is about the increasing the value to the shareholder, right? And must include the changes in operating income from price recovery. So as per Petrol's decision, the lack of operating income changes from productivity improvements will show the inefficiency of P's incorporation, even if it is successfully implemented financial perspective. So P incorporation must include the operating income changes from productivity improvements as one of the measures of financial performance. So that's the answer.